Chapter 12. The steady hum of the twin engines filled the cabin as John Walker's Beechcraft Model 18 began its final descent towards the Irish coast. Rory sat rigid in his seat, his weathered hands gripping the armrests with white-knuckled intensity. The emerald landscape below, normally a sight to stir his heart with pride and longing, now blurred before his eyes as memories of the past 2 decades flooded his mind. Thelma, his little girl. Except she wasn't so little anymore, was she? Rory's chest tightened as he thought of all the years he'd missed, all the moments forever lost to the ravages of war and its aftermath. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, all gone, experienced only through the faded photographs and second-hand accounts of his wife. "Steady on there, old boy." John's voice cut through Rory's reverie, the pilot's eyes flicking briefly from the instrument panel to his passenger. "You look like you're about to jump out of your skin." Rory forced a wan smile, his fingers relaxing their death grip on the armrests. "Just anxious to get on the ground, I suppose," he replied, his voice gruff with emotion he couldn't quite suppress. John nodded, his attention returning to the controls as he made a slight adjustment to their heading. "Won't be long now. Another 15 minutes, give or take." 15 minutes. In the grand scheme of things, it was nothing, a mere blink of an eye compared to the years Rory had already lost. And yet, as the plane continued its descent, each second seemed to stretch into eternity, giving Rory's guilt-ridden mind ample time to torment him with what-ifs and might-have-beens. He closed his eyes, trying to shut out the memories, but they came unbidden, as vivid and painful as if they'd happened yesterday. The day he'd shipped out, Margaret standing on the dock with little Thelma in her arms, barely more than an infant. The ache in his chest as he'd waved goodbye, not knowing if he'd ever see them again. The mud and blood of the trenches, the constant fear, the letters from home that were his only lifeline to sanity. And then, the moment that should have been one of the happiest of his life, tainted by the circumstances in which he'd received the news. Huddled in a makeshift dugout, the sound of artillery fire in the distance, as he'd read Margaret's tear-stained letter announcing Thelma's birth. He'd wept then, torn between joy and despair, knowing he was missing his daughter's first moments in this world. "You're doing it again," John's voice broke through Rory's thoughts once more. The pilot's tone was gentle, understanding. "Whatever's eating at you, it's written all over your face." Rory opened his eyes, meeting John's concerned gaze. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his greying hair. "Is it that obvious?" John's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Only to someone who's been there himself? Want to talk about it?" For a moment, Rory hesitated. He'd never been one for sharing his feelings, a trait ingrained by both his upbringing and his time in the military. But something in John's expression, a mixture of empathy and quiet strength, made him reconsider. "I can't stop thinking about Thelma," Rory admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "All the years I missed, all the moments I can never get back. I wasn't there for her, John. What kind of father does that make me?" John was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the controls as he navigated a patch of turbulence. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. The kind of father who fought to make the world a safer place for his daughter, the kind who sacrificed everything to ensure she'd have a future worth living in. Rory shook his head, unconvinced. "Noble sentiments, but cold comfort when I think of all I've missed. Her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. Gone, all of it. And now," his voice broke, the pain of Thelma's current situation threatening to overwhelm him. "And now you're here," John finished for him, his tone brooking no argument. "You're here, Rory, ready to move heaven and earth to bring her home. That's what matters now." Rory wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to find absolution in John's words. But the guilt that had been his constant companion for so many years was not so easily banished. "I abandoned her, John," Rory said, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. "I may have had my reasons, but the fact remains, I wasn't there when she needed me. And now, with this whole mess..." He trailed off, unable to articulate the fear and anger swirling within him. John was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the horizon as he made another slight adjustment to their course. When he spoke again, his voice was low and intense. "Let me tell you something, Rory," he began, his gaze still fixed on the sky ahead. "I've seen men broken by war, seen them come home shells of who they once were. But I've also seen men like you, men who carried the weight of their sacrifice with dignity, who never stopped fighting for their families, even when they were oceans apart." Rory listened, his throat tight with emotion, as John continued. "You didn't abandon Thelma. You fought for her every single day you were away, and now when she needs you most, you're here. That's not abandonment, Rory. That's love." Before Rory could respond, the radio crackled to life, the crisp voice of the control tower cutting through the emotional tension in the cockpit. "Beechcraft 937, this is Shannon Tower. You are cleared for landing on runway 24. Winds are light and variable. Visibility is good." John acknowledged the transmission, his demeanor shifting seamlessly from empathetic friend to professional pilot. "Roger that, Shannon Tower. Beechcraft 937 beginning final approach." The change in atmosphere was palpable as both men focused on the task at hand. Rory straightened in his seat, years of military training kicking in as he prepared to assist John with the landing procedures. "Run through the checklist with me, would you?" John asked, his eyes never leaving the instrument panel. Rory nodded, grateful for the distraction from his turbulent thoughts. "Right, landing gear? Down and locked. Flaps. Set to landing position." They continued through the list, their voices steady and professional. But even as Rory, focused on the immediate task, a new emotion began to simmer beneath the surface of his guilt and anxiety. Anger. It started as a low burn in the pit of his stomach, growing hotter and more intense with each passing second. Anger at the situation, at the unknown forces that had torn his family apart once again. Anger at himself for not being there to protect Thelma, and anger at the world for continually testing the bonds of his family. As the green fields of Ireland grew larger in the windscreen, Rory's hands clenched into fists, his jaw set in a hard line. Whoever was behind this, whoever had dared to lay a hand on his daughter, would pay dearly. The relic, the sword, whatever it was they were after, none of it mattered compared to Thelma's safety. "Easy there, old friend," John's voice cut through Rory's angry haze. "I can practically hear your teeth grinding from here." Rory forced himself to relax, unclenching his fists with effort. "Sorry," he muttered. "I can't help thinking about what's waiting for us down there, about Thelma and whoever's behind all this." John nodded, his expression grim. "I understand, but we need clear heads if we're going to sort this out. One step at a time, Rory. First, we land this bird. Then we figure out our next move." Rory took a deep breath, trying to center himself, as John had suggested. The pilot was right, of course. Letting his anger cloud his judgment wouldn't help Thelma. He needed to stay focused, to channel that anger into determination. As the plane descended through the last few hundred feet, the runway coming into sharp focus below them, Rory made a silent vow. He'd failed Thelma once, missing so much of her life due to circumstances beyond his control. He wouldn't fail her again. Whatever it took, whatever price he had to pay, he would bring his daughter home safely. The wheels touched down with a slight bump, John's expert hands guiding the Beechcraft to a smooth landing. As they taxied towards the small terminal building, Rory's mind was already racing ahead, planning their next moves. The war might be long over, but for Rory Bishop, a new battle was just beginning. And this time, failure was not an option.